Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of science for life, have you got those cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night when Lord Shoreman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as have been being consumed?
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it at a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink all the champagne? I merely ask for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households, champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I have only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algie.
I believe it is customary in good society to have some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
Well, how you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your country, is it not?
Shropshire? Yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't approve of you being here.
May I ask why?
My dear friend, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I've come up to town expressly to propose to them.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I don't really see anything romantic about proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there's nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one might be accepted. One usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly try to forget that.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algie. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
Oh, there is no use in speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. No, please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you have been eating them all the time.
That is quite different. They are my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is, too.
Well, my dear friend, you may not eat it as if you were going to eat it all. You behave as if you were married to them already. You are not married to them already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is great truth. It accounts for extraordinary number of bachelors that one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent.
My dear friend, Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and therefore, before I allow you to marry them, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algie, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
Lane, bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room last time they were here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was nearly offering a large reward.
I wish you would offer one. I find myself to be usually hard up.
There is no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter. For now that I look upon the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours at all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it's absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I'm quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. It is a present from someone by the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady that they are too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algie.
But why do they call herself Little Cecily if they're your aunt and lives in Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily, with their fondest love.
My dear friend, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is a matter that surely an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. For heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case.
Oh, yes. But why does your aunt call you their uncle? From Little Cecily, with their fondest love, to their dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what their size, should call their own nephew their uncle? I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to as many people as Ernest. Your answer to the name of Ernest? You look as though your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I know. It's on your card. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4 Albany. I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if you ever attempt to deny me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jacques in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you their uncle. Come, old boy, you had much better have the thing out at once.
My dear Algie, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now, go on. Tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I always suspected you of being a confirmed in secret a Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you're kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here. Now, produce to me your explanation, and pray make it improbable.
My dear friend, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in their will guardian to their granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as their uncle from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of their admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is this place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You're not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear friend. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algie, I don't know whether you will be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I've always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Ernest, who lives in the Albany, and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algie, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
Oh, the truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be so tedious if it were either, and modern literature, a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear friend. Don't try it. You should leave that to the people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyist I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest, in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you'd like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, in order that I may go down to the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willie's, for I had already really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You are absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people more than not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intentions of doing anything of that kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated as member of the family and set down with either no woman at all or 2. In the third place, I know perfectly well who they'll place me next to tonight. They will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with their own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it's not even decent. And that sort of thing has been enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It's simply washing one's clean linens in public. Besides, now that I know that you're a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill them in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in them. It is rather a bore, so I'm going to get rid of Ernest. And I strongly advise you to do the same with your invalid friend, who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. If you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you'll be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I ever marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, and they are the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company, 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half the time.
For heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear friend, nothing is easy nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition. Oh, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring the bell in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get them out of here for 10 minutes, so you have the opportunity in proposing to Gwendolyn, may I dine with you tonight at Willie's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about making meals. It's so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart, am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for development, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since their poor husband's death. I never saw a woman of so altered. They look quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here next to me, Gwendolyn?
Thanks, Mama. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir, not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear their hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its color. From what cause I, of course, cannot say. Oh, thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. They are such a nice woman, so attentive to their husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I am afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, they are accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say, a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I had just received a telegram from my poor friend Bunbury. They're very ill. They seem to think I should be with them.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up their mind whether they were going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd, nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary beauty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but They never seem to take much notice as far as any improvement in their ailment goes. I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury, from me, to be kind enough to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if they are still conscious. And I think I can promise you that they'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people do not listen. And if one plays bad music, people do not talk. But I'll run over the program I've drawn out if you would kindly come into the next room with me for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think that they are improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe is so. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mama.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a way of coming back suddenly into a room, and I have often had to speak to them about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I've admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite well aware of that fact, and I often wish that in public at any rate you had more demonstrated. For me, you have always had this irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Ernest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that they had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, it is. I know it is. But supposing it was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, have little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say that I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John. And I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. They would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only real safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There's no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you. But you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think I am only fair to tell you, quite frankly, beforehand, that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mr. Worthing? What have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long have you been at it? I am afraid you have very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, the men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from the semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mama, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mama.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should their health permit them, will inform you of that fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that they could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mama!
In the carriage, Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn, the carriage!
Yes, Mama.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you, you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name should your answer be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
Ah, I am glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of opinion that a man who desires to get married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing. I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes, and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investment, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that's to be said about land.
I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it about 1,500 acres. I believe, but I don't depend on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You own a townhouse, I hope? A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like my Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course I can get it back whenever I like, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham. I don't know them.
Oh, they go about very little. They are considerably advanced in years.
Ah, nowadays that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something there. However, that could be easily altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us, or come in the evening at any rate. Now, to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune, but to lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? They were evidently a man of some wealth. Were they born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce? Or did they rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents. It would be nearer the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because they happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in their pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did the charitable gentleman who had a first-class ticket for the seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I was in a handbag, a somewhat large black leather handbag with handles to it, an ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to them in mistake for their own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. Now, as for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion, has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now, but it could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognition as a good position in society.
May I ask you then, what would you advise me to do? I need hardly to say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl, brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. For goodness sakes, don't play that ghastly tune, Algie. How idiotic you are.
Go off all right, dear boy. You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I know it is their way, they have it, but they're always refusing people. I think it most ill-natured of them.
Oh, Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as they're concerned, we are engaged. Their mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, they are a monster, without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I beg your pardon, Algie. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt in the way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct of when to die.
That is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
That is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like their mother in about 150 years, do you, Algie?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That is theirs.
Is that clever?
It's perfectly phrased. Quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have.
I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools. Oh, clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about you being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear friend, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to them if they are pretty, and to someone else if they are plain.
That is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
Oh, before the end of the week, I shall have got rid of them. I say they died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy. Quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear friend. It's the sort of things that runs in families. You had much better say a severe chill.
You are sure a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then, my poor brother Ernest to carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill, that gets rid of them.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor dear brother Ernest. Won't they feel their loss a good deal?
That's all right. Cecily's not a silly romantic girl. I'm glad to say. They have got a capital appetite, go long walks, and pay no attention at all to their lessons.
I'd rather like to see Cecily.
I will take very good care you never do. They're excessively pretty, and they are only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty young ward who is only just 18?
One doesn't blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything like that half an hour after they have met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, my dear boy, if we want to get to a good table at Willie's, we really must go and get dressed. Do you know that it's nearly 7?
It is always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
What should we do after dinner? Go to the theater?
Oh no, I love listening.
Well, let us go to the club.
No. I hate talking.
Well, we might trot around the Empire at 10.
No, I can't bear looking at things. It's so silly.
Well, what should we do?
Nothing.
It is awfully hard work doing nothing. However, I don't mind hard work when there's no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Gwendolyn, I really don't think I can allow this.
Algie, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You are not quite old enough to do that.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mama's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I ever had over Mama, I lost at the age of 3. But although they may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else and marry often, nothing that they can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mama with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require some serious consideration. I'll communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn round now.
I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'll be going Bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can put up my dress clothes, a smoking jacket, and all of Bunbury's suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you are a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
There's a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm a little anxious about poor Bunbury. That's all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
Oh, that is nonsense, Algie. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Oh, nobody ever does.
Act 2 of The Importance of Being Earnest is stage managed by Brett Arthur and directed by Mason Barber.
Cecily! Cecily! Surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar's on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know quite well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. They laid particular stress on your German as they were leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, they always lay stress on your German when they are leaving for town.
Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes they are so serious I can't think them quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and their gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as they are. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why they often look a little bored when the three of us are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in their life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in their conversation. You must remember they're constant and excited about that unfortunate young man, their brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, their brother, to come down here sometime. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know, Germany and geometry and things of that kind that influence a man very much.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to their own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I'm not sure that I would desire to reclaim them. I'm not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let them reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should be keeping a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I would probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually lists the things that had never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Modi sends us.
Do not speak slightly of the 3-volume novels, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
You really did, Miss Prism. How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it doesn't seem very fair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript was unfortunately abandoned. I used the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, I trust you are well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do them so much good if they had a short stroll with you in the park, Mr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not at all about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon their lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet?
We did not expect them till Monday afternoon.
Yes. They usually like to spend their Sunday in London. They're not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts, that unfortunate young man your brother seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Laetitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion, merely drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both no doubt at evensong.
I think, dear doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism. With pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you'll read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee, you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy, horrid geometry, horrid German!
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. They brought their luggage with them.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, Albany West, Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell them that Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. They seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. They said they were anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. I suppose you better ask the housekeeper for a room for them.
Yes, miss.
I have never really met a wicked person before. I feel quite frightened. I am so afraid they will look like just anyone else. They do.
You are my cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. And you, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest, my wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I'm really not wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I'm wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very unexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, of course I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
Now that you mention it, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be very proud of that, though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you are here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up to, on the first train Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of beauty of life. But I think you better wait till Jack comes back. I know they want to speak to you about your immigrating.
About my what?
You're immigrating. They have gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly want to let Jack buy my outfit. They have no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, they said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh well, the accounts I've received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I am not. That is why I want you to reform me. You might take that as your mission, if you don't mind, cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I have no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind me reforming myself this afternoon?
It is quite audacious of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You look a little worse.
That is because I am hungry.
How thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, One requires wholesome and regular meal. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite until I've had a buttonhole first.
A yellow rose?
No, I sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it is right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I don't know what I would talk to him about.
You were too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No man is ever attractive, except to their wife.
And often I've been told, not even to them.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended upon. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps they followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I've returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading their life of pleasure?
Dead.
Your brother Ernest, dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for them. I trust they'll profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing that you were always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. They had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with them at the end?
No. They died abroad in Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall they reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am strangely susceptible to drafts. Will the funeral take place here?
No, they seem to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of the mind at least. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful or, as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation and festal days. The last time I delivered it was in the cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society of the Prevention of Discontent among the Upper Orders. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen, all right? I mean, of course you're continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I've often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. I'm very fond of children. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already?
I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed, I believe, advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
I might trot around about 5 if that would suit you.
Perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time, a case of twins that occurred recently in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened along with with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Jack! Oh, I'm so pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you have on. Go do and change them.
Cecily!
My child.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? You look happy. You look as if you had a toothache. And I have such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother! Your brother Ernest. They arrived about half an hour ago.
Nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly they have been behaving to you in the past, they are still your brother. You couldn't be as disheartless to disown them. I'll tell him to come out and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to their loss, their sudden return seems to me strangely distressing.
My brother in the dining room? I don't know what it all means. I think this is perfectly absurd. Good heavens.
Brother John! Oh, I've come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I've given you, and that I intend to live a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take their hand. I think they're coming down here disgraceful, and they know perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about their poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he visits so often. And surely there must be some good in one who visits the kind and leaves the pleasures of London for a bed of pain.
Oh, they've been talking about Bunbury, have they?
Yes, and they told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and their terrible state of health.
Bunbury. Well, I won't have them talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults were all on my side, but I must say that I think it's rather cold of Brother John. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering that this is the first time I've come here.
Uncle Jack, if you do not shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, This is the last time I shall ever do it.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation. I think we might leave the two brothers alone together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reunion is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel so very happy.
You young scoundrel, Algie. You must get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any bunburying here.
I have put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I've unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
Their luggage?
Mr. Ernest's luggage. Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying for a whole week with you at your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You've got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave you so long as you're in mourning. That would be the most unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you'd stay with me, I suppose. I think it very kind if you didn't.
Well, will you go change? Will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long. I never saw anybody take so long to dress with such little result.
Well, at any rate, that is better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I'm occasionally overdressed, I make up for it by being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you've got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you will have a pleasant journey back to town. This bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it's been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see them before I go and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Ah, there they are.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
They're gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, are they going to take you for a nice drive?
They're sending me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from whom you have only been with a brief period of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equability, but even a momentary separation from one whom you have just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Marion, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every visible way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you would allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd rather like to look at it. May I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a young girl's record of her own thoughts and imitations, also meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I am quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come around next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack will be very much annoyed if they knew you were going to stay until next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care for anybody in this whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
Silly boy, of course. Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very bad and wicked, you, of course, formed the chief conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course, anyone who's talked about very much is often very attractive. One feels there must be something in them after all. I dearly say that I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling. But when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by your ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or another. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you here under this old tree. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name and this little bandit with the true love's mark. I promised you to wear it always.
Did I give this to you? Oh, it's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, your wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given you for leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
Oh, my letters! But my own sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need not remind me of that, Ernest. I remember all too well I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote 3 times often and 3 times oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. That would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after the engagement were so beautiful and so badly spelt that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still remains charming.
But why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all, Cecily. I am very much hurt indeed that you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
It would have been a real serious engagement if I hadn't broken it off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally. Does it?
Yes, darling, with a little help from others.
I'm so glad.
You'll never break off our engagement again, Cecily?
I don't think I could break it off now that we have actually met. Besides, of course, there is a question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling, but I've always had this girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Ernest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor woman who's married to a man whose name is not Ernest.
But, my dear child, you do mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name Algernon.
Well, my own dear, sweet, loving little darling, I really can't see why you should object to the name Algernon. It is not a bad name at all. In fact, it's a rather aristocratic name. Half the chaps who get into bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character. But I feel I would not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in practices of all rites and ceremonials of the church?
Oh, yes. Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. They have never written a single book, so you can imagine how much they know.
Oh, I must see them at once on a most important christening. I mean, most important business.
Oh.
I shan't be away more than half an hour.
Considering that we've been engaged since February the 14th, I am now just meeting you for the first time today. I think it is quite hard that you should leave me for such a long period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an imprudent boy you are. I like their hair so much. I must write their proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax is just called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in the library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray, ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, I suppose one of the many good elderly women who's associated with Uncle Jack and some of their charity work in London. I don't quite like women who are interested in charity work. I think it is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew? Oh, what a very sweet name. Something tells me we're going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we have known each other such a considerably short time.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you'll always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you like.
Then it is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favorable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside of the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. And certainly once a man begins to neglect their domestic duties, they become painfully effeminate, do they not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very unattractive. Cecily, Mama, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is a part of their system. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. I am very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh no, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has a difficult task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, it is strange. They never mentioned to me that they had a ward. How secretive of them. they grow more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I met you. But I am bound to state that now I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing that you were, well, a little bit older than you seem to be when not so quite alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly,
Pray do. I think that whenever one has something unpleasant to say, one should be always quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. They are the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be as impossible to them as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is their brother, their eldest brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that they had a brother.
I am sorry to say that they have not been on good terms for a long time.
That accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I've never heard of any man mention their brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be theirs.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolyn, there is no reason why I should make it a secret to you. Our little county paper is sure to take this next week's paper. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My dear Cecily, I think that there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you must be under some miscommunication. Ernest proposed to me nearly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for they have asked me to be their wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I'm so sorry, dear Cecily. If it is any disappointment to you, but I am afraid that I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolyn, if it has caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, they have clearly changed their mind.
If the poor friend has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue them at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gotten into, I will never reproach them with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time of wearing the Chasuble mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say I've never had to see a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills, quite close, one can see 5 counties.
Oh, 5 counties. Oh, I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
I'm so glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are so common here, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country, if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
Ah, this is what the newspaper called agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the austerities are suffering from it very much at present. It's almost an epidemic among them, I've been told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Oh, bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
Farewell.
Oh. You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the militia of any other girl, there's no length to which I wouldn't go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I'm trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest, my own
Gwendolyn,
Ernest.
darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are to be engaged to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Of course not. Who could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must have been some misunderstanding. Miss Fairfax, the gentleman, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack. Oh.
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Oh, goodness, Gwendolyn.
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean, to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such a thought into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrieff.
Algernon Moncrieff. Oh. Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I've ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I'm really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I've never had a brother in my life, and I certainly have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never had a brother of any kind?
Never. Not of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call Bunburying, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I have ever had in my life.
Well, you've no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has the right to Bunbury wherever one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist? Good heavens.
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunburying. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't got the remotest idea. About everything, I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to, dear Algie. And a very good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off color, aren't they, dear Jack? They won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was. And that is not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that your taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable. To say nothing of the fact that they are my ward.
I see no possible defense at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that they are my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn. That is all. I love them.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore them.
There's certainly no chance of your marrying of Miss Cardew.
I don't think there's much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Well, that is none of your business.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties.
How you can sit there, calmly eating muffins when we are in this horrible trouble, I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should only eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I am in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating a muffin because I am unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that is no reason why you should eat them at all in a greedy way.
I wish you would have a tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens! I suppose a man may eat their own muffins in their own garden.
But you just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algie, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. That is absurd. I never go anywhere without my dinner. Nobody ever does except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Ernest.
My dear friend, the sooner you give up the nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I naturally will take the name of Ernest. Gwendolyn would wish it. We can't both be christened Ernest. It's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence at all that I've ever been christened by anybody. I should think it extremely probable I never was, and so does Dr. Chasuble. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened in years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you're not quite sure about having been christened, I must say I think it rather dangerous of you venturing in on it now. Oh, it might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very, very closely connected with you was just very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said yourself that a severe chill was not hereditary.
Oh, it never has been before, I know. But I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements.
That is nonsense. You are always talking nonsense.
Jack, you are at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left.
But I hate tea cake.
Why on earth then do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? What ideas of hospitality you have.
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet. And there's still 1 muffin left.
Oh.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to Act 2 of The Importance of Being Earnest. Act 3 will premiere under the direction of Jhada Ann Walker on October 30th, Friday at noon. We hope you can come and join for that as well. Thank you.
Follow us into the house at once seems to show me that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They're looking at us. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough. They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
They're looking at us. What effrontery. Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolyn, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrieff, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have the opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly sounds like a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe them.
I don't, but it does not alter the wonderful beauty of their answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have an opportunity of coming up to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not the moment for German skepticism. Their explanations appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content what Mr. Moncrieff said. Their voice alone inspires one with absolute confidence.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes, I mean no.
Oh, true. I had forgotten. There are principles at stake for one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? This task is an unpleasant one.
Could we not speak at the same time?
Oh, an excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time?
Certainly.
Your Christian names are still an inseparable barrier.
That is all.
Our Christian names.
Is that all?
But we are
Going to be christened?
this afternoon.
For my sake? Oh, you were prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, you're ready to face this dreadful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes, where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned. Men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Darling.
Lady Bracknell!
Gwendolyn, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mama.
Come here. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young and of physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by their trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed them at once by a luggage train. Their unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that they are attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive them. Indeed, I have never undeceived them on any question. I would consider it wrong. But of course, you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now, as regards Algernon.
Yes, Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury resides?
Oh, no. Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at the present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? Their death must have been extremely sudden.
I killed Bunbury this afternoon. Oh, I mean, poor Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did they die of?
Bunbury? They were quite
Exploded? Oh, were they the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, they are well punished for their morbidity.
Dear Augusta, I mean, they were found out. The doctors, they found out Bunbury could not live. That is what I mean. So, Bunbury died.
Now that we have finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me to be a most peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. and Moncrieff and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I did not know whether there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air of this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seems to me considerably above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, Southwest Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporn, Fifeshire, and B.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby, and Markby? A firm of the very highest position in their profession. So far, I am satisfied.
How extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
A life crowded with incident, I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I am not myself in favor of premature experiences. Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have met you.
Oh, a moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000? And in the funds? Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady now that I really look at them. Few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an era of surfaces. Come over here, dear. Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it, but we can soon alter all of that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous result in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lansing, and after 3 months their own husband did not know them.
And after 6 months, nobody knew them.
Kindly turn around, sweet child. No. The side view is what I want. Yes, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The two weak points in our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin, a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. They're worn very high just at present. Algernon!
Yes, Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world. And I don't care 2 pence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but their debts to depend upon. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I am not in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I'm Miss Cardew's guardian, and they cannot marry without my consent until they come of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say, ostentatiously eligible young man. They have nothing, but they look everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but the fact is that I do not approve at all of their moral character. I suspect them of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. They are Oxonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London, on an important question of romance, they obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, they drink, I've been just informed by my butler, an entire pint of my bottle Perrier Brut 89, succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. They subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin, and what makes their conduct all the more heartless is that they were perfectly well aware from the first that I have no brother, that I have never had a brother, and that I don't intend to have a brother, not even of any kind. I distinctly told them so myself yesterday this afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I've decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I'm really only 18. but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about their age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be very long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage, so I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, any matter of importance.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you again, but it is only fair to tell you that, according to the terms of their grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age till they are 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my own knowledge, they have been 35 ever since they arrived at the age of 40, which was many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be even still more attractive at the age you mentioned than they are at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Aggie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting. Even for 5 minutes for somebody, it always makes me rather cross. I'm not punctual myself, I know. But I do like punctuality in others, and waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Then what's to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrieff.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively, they cannot wait till they are 35. A remark which I am bound to say seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature, but I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear. We have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christening, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if they learned that that was the way in which you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand, then, that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
No.
I don't think that, as things are now, it would be of much practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They favor the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I have completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, as your present mood seems to be one peculiarly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I am on my way to join them.
Pray, allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may be one of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
They are the most cultivated of ladies, and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position they hold in your household?
I'm a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of them, I must see them at once. Let them be sent for.
They approach. They are not.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been waiting for you there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism! Come here, Prism. Prism! Where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104, Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. On the morning of the day you mentioned, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in his perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria, the Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, wait for me here.
If you are not too long, I will wait for you here all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They're hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems very distraught.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
That noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if they are having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped now.
Oh, I wish they would arrive at some conclusion.
This suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes, here is the injury received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. Here is the stain on the lining caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred at Leamington. And here, on the lock, are my initials. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I'm delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It's been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes, Mother.
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I do not deny that that is a serious blow, but after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? What should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell? I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I am afraid that the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrieff, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I knew I had a brother. I've always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you young scoundrel. You will have to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Well, not till today, old boy, I admit. I did my best, however. Though I was out of practice.
My own? But what own are you? Your Christian name now that you have become someone else.
Good heavens, I had quite forgotten about that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble care do you have, Gwendolyn?
Then the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That is settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what's my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall what the general's Christian name was, but I have no doubt that they had one. They were eccentric, I admit, but that was only in later years, and that was the result of the Indian climate and marriage and indigestion and other things of that kind.
Algy, can you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never on speaking terms. They died before I was a year old.
Their name would appear in the army list of the period, I suppose. Aunt Augusta?
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in their domestic life, but I have no doubt that their name would appear in any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. And generals, Malum, Moxbum, Magley, what ghastly names they have. Markby, Mixby, Mobbs, Moncrieff, Lieutenant 1840, Captain, Lieutenant, Colonel, Colonel, General 1869. Christian names. Ernest John. I always told you, Gwendolyn, that my name was Ernest, didn't I? Well, it is Ernest after all. I mean, it naturally is Ernest.
Yes, I remember now that the general was called Ernest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, my own Ernest. I felt it from the first that you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all their life they've been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
My own one.
Letitia.
Frederick, at last.
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, you seem to me to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.